Phil Knight's story is one of the best examples of how a small idea can eventually become a massive business. Before Nike became one of the biggest sports brands in the world, Phil Knight was just a young man living in Oregon. Knight grew up in Portland, Oregon, and became interested in running while he was young. He eventually attended the University of Oregon, where he ran track under a famous coach named Bill Bowerman. But Knight wasn't just interested in running. He was also interested in business. While studying at the University of Oregon, Knight came up with an idea. He believed that high-quality running shoes could be made in other countries for less money and then sold in America. At the time, this was not some huge business plan. It was basically an idea. After college, Knight went to Stanford University to study business. For a class assignment, he wrote a paper about how Japanese companies could produce high-quality running shoes and sell them in America. But Knight didn't want his idea to stay on paper. He wanted to test it. So he traveled to Japan. While in Japan, Knight visited a Japanese shoe company called Onitsuka Tiger. Knight was impressed by their running shoes and believed they could compete with the major shoe companies in America. He made a deal with the company to distribute their shoes in the United States. And this is where the story really begins. Knight returned to Oregon with samples of the shoes. He sent some of them to his old track coach, Bill Bowerman. Bowerman was interested in the shoes, and the two eventually became business partners. They started a company called Blue Ribbon Sports. The business was extremely small compared to what Nike would eventually become. Knight began selling the Japanese Tiger shoes himself. Instead of having massive stores or huge advertising campaigns, he went to track meets and talked to runners. He would bring the shoes with him and sell them directly to athletes. He was basically building the business one customer at a time. The shoes became more popular, and Blue Ribbon Sports continued growing. But Knight and Bowerman didn't just want to sell someone else's shoes forever. They wanted to create their own. Bowerman was especially focused on making running shoes better. He experimented with different designs and materials to make shoes lighter and more effective for runners. One of his most famous experiments involved a waffle iron. Bowerman was trying to create a better sole for a running shoe. He poured rubber into a waffle iron, creating a pattern that became the inspiration for a new shoe sole. This showed something important about the company. They weren't simply trying to sell shoes. They were trying to make better shoes. Eventually, Blue Ribbon Sports decided to create its own brand. That brand was called Nike. The name came from the Greek goddess of victory. And Nike needed a logo. Knight hired a graphic design student named Carolyn Davidson to create one. She designed the famous Nike swoosh. Knight wasn't immediately amazed by it. But the simple symbol would eventually become one of the most recognizable logos in the world. Nike continued growing, and the company started developing its own shoes instead of relying on Tiger. One of the biggest lessons from Phil Knight's story is that Nike did not begin as a giant company. It started with an idea. Knight didn't have massive factories. He didn't have billions of dollars. He didn't know that his company would eventually become one of the most valuable sports brands in history. He simply saw an opportunity and decided to test it. He went to Japan. He found shoes he believed could sell. He brought them back to Oregon. Then he started selling them himself. The business grew from there. Phil Knight's story shows that sometimes the beginning of a huge company doesn't look impressive at all. It can look like a person carrying a box of shoes around and trying to convince people to buy them. Nike started with a small idea, a trip to Japan, some Tiger running shoes, and a willingness to keep going. And that small idea eventually became Nike.